सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Namaste, good evening, a very warm welcome to everyone to another wonderful Monday evening satsang. We are at a very auspicious occasion. Tomorrow is Mahashivaratri, the celebration of Shiva or the awareness. So throughout the night, Shiva signifies awareness, and the idea of celebrating it throughout the night is to be awake 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So a very, very happy Shivratri in advance to each and every one of you, to all your family and friends, all your near and dear ones. May the light, the awareness of Shiva bring in awareness to all of us and our family, and let the light of awareness be the guiding light of our lives. So there is nothing very peculiar about the title, "The Flame Burns Its Own Wick," isn't it? So in this process, the flame, once when we light a candle or even a lamp, oil lamp with a wick, the one thing that happens is it starts giving light. Now, we can attempt to understand this in two parts. One is, the flame burns and throws light to its surroundings and lightens up, brightens up the objects that are in its field. So if we take a lamp in a dark room, or a candle in a dark room, or even a torchlight in a dark room, the light itself provides brightness to the surrounding areas in the room, enabling us to see objects in the world. Now, in the process, what happens? The candle burns itself. Slowly the wax that is there in the candle starts burning and starts reducing. But then, this is a straightforward thing that we can all observe very immediately. So does it happen with the oil lamp as well, any oil lamp, that it lightens up, it brightens the surrounding, bringing into its field of light all the objects that is there, enabling the onlooker to see the objects clearly. So without the light, though the objects may be there, we may not be able to see it clearly. Now, this is about the physical light. So the importance of light is that it provides light for us to enable us to see the objects clearly. Um, the if the objects are present but the surroundings are dark, our eyes will not be able to see them. So the foundation of all seeing quote unquote, it includes all five sense organs: seeing, smelling, hearing, tasting, and touching, seems to be the light that is thrown on the objects of the experience. And that is the light of awareness. Just like the sunlight, when it rises early in the morning and it lightens the whole surface of the earth that that we live in, and in the part of the earth that we live in. And we get to see, we get to experience the world when we wake up. So two aspects are required. One is actually that the being must wake up, or the individual must wake up in the morning. Second, the day must be bright and sunny for us to experience the world. So this is an important aspect that we must not forget. In spite, now, what is happening in the process? It is said that the sun consumes, in the process of giving heat and light, consumes zero point 0.5 tons of its own material every second. Half a ton of material every second. That means when it burns, sun is a bundle of radioactive energy, a very high intense radioactive energy, and by burning its own body, half a ton of its own material every second, it provides light, heat, and ultraviolet rays to the earth. For what? To enable life to be born, sustained. Life in all forms, whether it's plant or human or animal forms. Without light, without sunlight, life is not possible. That is on the earth. So it denotes one important thing: a supreme level of sacrifice. The sun destroys its own body at the rate of half a ton every second, just to give light and heat and the ultraviolet rays to the earth, for the sake of all matter and living beings on the earth. And this activity is not being done from the past 1 or 2 years, or 1 or 200 years, or 1 or 2,000 years. Astronomers estimate the age of the sun at present to be 4.5 billion years. And they estimate that even if the sun continues to destroy itself for another 4.5 billion years, it has enough matter to continue to live. So there is a miracle there, because it doesn't seem to be just consumption of its own body, while for 4.5 billion years in the past, every second the sun is giving up half a ton of its own body every second. Now, if you calculate that, there are 21,600 seconds in a day, and so many tons of material every day, and for 4.5 billion years, its own body is being destroyed. What other supreme level of sacrifice can be there just to enable life to be available on earth? Now, this denotes one other thing. It cannot, this any physical object cannot be sustained only if it is consumed, isn't it? If it keeps on getting destroyed, it will not get sustained. It can't live long, it will wither away, decay, and die. But the sun has been there for the past 4.5 billion years and continues to grow strong. And even under the present estimate, the scientists estimate another 4.5 billion years of sun's life without getting destroyed. What does that indicate? It also indicates one other important aspect, the aspect of renewal. In giving up, in destroying oneself for a greater cause, the one that is given up, the source is continuously being replenished. So much so that it has become kind of immortal, relatively speaking. So when there is a sankalpa, when there is a higher cause identified and an action taken according to a higher cause, whatever we give, either in terms of time, money, energy, or whatever skill, knowledge, that which we give continues to grow. Have we noticed one thing? Teachers have very sharp minds even after they have retired. That is because they are continuously teaching and their knowledge continuously keeps growing. So, whatever is given, the life's principle is it will grow. Unlike the transactional idea that what is given will reduce. Of course, transactionally, when we give something, when we spend money, our bank balance will reduce. But it doesn't keep on reducing because there is a return from every spend as well. In the transactional world, there are a set of laws that are to be followed in order to replenish, and that we won't get into. But we are looking at the underlying spiritual principle that giving up comes first. And with every giving up, there is a process of renewal happening knowingly or unknowingly at the background that sustains the giver. And the perfect example is the sun. It not only sustains the giver, but it grows the giver also. Grows the giver in strength for one reason, because it has a pure intent. It grows the giver to give more and more beings to come under the influence of that giving. Giving can be in terms of knowledge, it can be in terms of time and energy, which is seva, or skill when you do a job, karma yoga. Even in technology development in the industry, whatever it is. Or it can be in terms of relationship and harmony. Now, this is one aspect of giving. That is, when the flame burns, it throws light. And it doesn't throw light for its own sake. It throws light as a process to enable to liven up, to lighten up, to brighten up the surroundings, to enable the person who every object to be lit, to enable another sentient being to see the object, experience the object. So no experience is ever possible without light. No, just like no seeing is ever possible of an object without the external light, no experience is ever possible for any living being without the light of awareness or the witness. It is the witness that brightens all the instruments of our knowing to enable the experience. It lights up the mind, it lights up the five senses, and it also lights up the prana to energize and keep the body moving. So, life is a series of changes, right? Without change, life as life in the sentient form cannot be deemed to exist. How do we say a person is living? They check the heartbeat, the pulse rate, the breathing, and you see there is an activity of the heart that is signifying, or the brain waves. So the instruments measure the heartbeat, it gives series of waves. As long as the heartbeat is there, the person is supposed to be considered living. Or as long as the brain is active, there is some activity. The person may be silent, but the brain will be showing waves of activity, thinking, perception, and all of that. Now, the moment the waveform flattens, no changes, then the doctor comes and declares that the person is no more. So the change, the perception of change is important to say that a being, a living being, is alive. But then the source, the energy that is provided to energize the activity levels of all the instruments of action and thinking, that itself will not change. It's just an infinite source. So the first part is, of course, there are two things. One is it'll keep on, if as long as the intent is pure, it's a supreme sankalpa that is taken on behalf of the larger good. That which we give will come back manyfold. In what form, we cannot say at this time, and at what time, we cannot say. It may not be an immediate return. It may also not be in the same form that it was given. But the giver will be strengthened and active always, because of the sheer purity of intent of giving. The other thing is, in the process of giving, the limited keeps burning. The body, as we work, take the case of human beings. We work, we put our energy in our profession, at least 10 hours a day, 8 to 10 hours a day. In these days, it is more than, it is even 12 to 14 hours a day in the days of hectic activity these days. with the advent of IT, industry, and competition everywhere, online business. So people are constantly on the move. Now, the energy gets consumed for the activity. Now, it is inevitable that the body will lose energy in the activity and we have to replenish it, which we do through food, through pranayama and yoga, and through meditation, right? So, a constant replenishing of the energy is required for the human body. But at the same time, the ability of the body to absorb these energy and recharge itself to the original level keeps on diminishing with age. What is an example? A good example is the mobile phone. When we buy a mobile phone, when we charge the battery, a new mobile phone will retain the battery charge for at least 2 to 3 days. But as we keep using and the phone gets older, we have to recharge the battery every day. Sometimes, as it gets even more older, we have to start recharging a couple of times a day. That is because the battery would have lost its ability to hold the charge that much longer as it ages. So, Mata Amritanandamayi says it beautifully. Um, the body is subject to wear and tear as a natural process. There are two ways in which you can engage the body. The moment we come to life on earth, the body is engaged in a natural wear and tear. So, whenever we engage in any activity, it will keep on, engaging in getting involved with wear and tear, and it will diminish after the initial peak. So, Mata Amritanandamayi says it beautifully. Your body will anyway be subject to wear and tear. So, you have only two choices. First one is to engage in, in the sensual pleasures of the world for happiness and pleasure. And then indulge. So, over time, the sense organs will keep on diminishing. Sensual pleasures can be, having good food, going to a picnic spot, looking at a beautiful scenery, or even, the physical touch, any of these. But how long will they last? The sense organs will start diminishing in their own ability to perceive sensitively, and they will need more and more of those inputs in order to get the same level of happiness. So the body keeps regenerating and degenerating, sorry, over time, and getting into through wear and tear. At the same time, you will also have to go and look at the other approach. When you engage in service, you will still be using body and mind, and the same physical principle is still applicable. The body will continue to degenerate, but then, when we engage in a service, we will get some kind of peace and happiness which was not there earlier. The purification of the mind happens. So when the body follows the natural law of wear and tear, decline and destruction eventually, after the moment it is born, we have only two choices. The first is an unawakened being who constantly engages in the activities of the world and the senses, and still the body is subject to decline and eventual death. And when there is maturity and awakening, the same person will engage his resources, which is body mind complex, in the activities of the world as a service for the larger good. Even then, the body will decline and eventually decay. But the body mind is better utilized for the larger good. So that is the difference between these two activities. As a law of governing physical objects, we can't escape the decline and deterioration, decline and death of the body. But how, in what way do we engage this available resource with us is the key question to ask ourselves. So why are we talking about this? The energy of the body is like the flame in the lamp. Like the oil which is in the lamp is limited and it will burn away after the oil is consumed. Now the flame can either be used for selfish purposes or for selfless purposes. The choice is completely ours. If there is one choice, it is this: I have this resource with me, this body-mind complex. How do I use it? For my own self or for the good of, larger good of everyone? That is why we can draw examples from the lamp and the wick, oil lamp and the wick, or the candle, or even the sun, just to be inspired ourselves that though the sun gives light and burns itself, by its natural process of burning itself, it gives light to provide life to beings on earth, to provide life on earth. So the wick burning itself can't be prevented. When we light an incense stick, an agarbatti, it gives fragrance, not just in the immediate surroundings. It spreads when air blows throughout the room or throughout the house. But in the process, the incense stick burns itself. After a time, it is no more. But even after the incense stick is burned, the incense remains in the air. How long? Depends on the purity of intent and how much we have been able to contribute with our own resources. Not from the point of view of getting name and fame in the society, but just from the pure intention that I and the other are not different. The God in me is the same God in the other person. The self in me is the same as the self in the other person. There are no two selves, there is only one self. It is just reflected to different extents in different body mind complexes. That's the only difference. Unfortunately, what happens is when it gets reflected differently in different body mind complexes, we think the reflected selves, the selves are many, the reflections are many, but the sun is one. Just like the sun reflecting in different pots of water differently, depending on the purity of water in each pot, we can see as many reflections as the number of parts. So also, we can see as many individual reflections of the universal energy as the number of living beings. But the original source, Atman, Brahman, Self, Supreme, Absolute, Witness, Sakshi, is one, only one. It can never be two or more, isn't it? So, as long as the activity is, what is the way out then? The first thing is that um, as a human being, especially as a human being, um, in fact, all living beings, animals, plants, and humans, the first and the foremost is the survival instinct. And we want to continue to live eternally, and therefore we engage in activities that promote our presence, either through working in the profession or engaging in relationship with family and friends to widen our thing. Why do we have a large friend circle? Because we feel we are limited, and when we have many friends and we get many likes from Facebook friends, or we have a large WhatsApp group, we feel we have, our circle is big, we have expanded. So expansion of activities, what we can't do internally ourselves, we have started using technology like social media to help us psychologically achieve this, to expand our boundary of relationship to more than just our immediate myself and my family, to a large circle of friends, not just locally in the places where we live, but throughout worldwide. Now we have to consider this aspect. When we think about something that does not survive, we always, our mind immediately looks into trying to conceptualize and find out what is eternal, what is the truth. Now, if we try to jump into trying to find out the truth while we are engaged in the limited body mind complex, we can only conceptualize it. It'll be a miserable frustration because the mind cannot grasp what is the truth. As long, that is why the first step in trying to understand permanency is for the mind to recognize and realize the false as false, the impermanent as permanent. I mean, impermanent as impermanent, the temporary as temporary. What is the problem today? the mind plays a trick, the ego plays a trick that it tries to brand what is impermanent as permanent. The ultimate purpose of all this is that I do this because I want to be happy. Now, sometimes many times, this is a pitfall. This addiction to happiness, this addiction to pleasure, and retraction to pain, withdrawal for pain or sorrow, that is actually the biggest stumbling block. The search for happiness can be very addictive. And no, everyone agrees by their own experience that no happiness that they have experienced so far has been permanent. And therefore, we are chasing pillar to post, running behind everywhere in search of the happiness, elusive, permanent happiness. So, Nisargadatta Maharaj beautifully puts it this way, that pain and pleasure are the same. While pleasure is like the peak of the wave, pain is like the crest of the wave. They are a part of the same wave. And beneath the wave is the still water of the ocean or the pond. So, the moment we resist pain, the moment we resist sorrow, why do we resist sorrow? Because we want happiness. Why do we resist pain? Because our search is for pleasure. And why do we want to stick to happiness? Because we want to run away from pain or sorrow. But the truth is, both of these come in pairs. Just like, other things like profit and loss. No business has ever operated only on profits. A business has both profit and loss. No sportsman has ever won all the time. Indian cricket was at its peak for some years, winning the World Cup. But then they lost it. So, winning and losing, profit and loss, happiness and sadness, pain and pleasure, heat and cold, all of these are nature's play. And these are natural laws that cannot be broken. Why? Because nature is Prakriti Shakti, is divine, another aspect of Shiva or awareness, an integral aspect of Shiva or awareness or the supreme law or dharma. So, the very addiction to happiness is the stumbling block to realizing what is permanent. When we get addicted to something that we want, that we like, and we want to move away or reject what we don't like or don't want, there itself we have created duality, complete duality, isn't it? And therefore, when we are happy, that's also the time. Normally what we do when we are sad, when we are frustrated, we tend to think of God. We engage in prayer. Of course it helps in trying to understand and stabilize our mind in order to be able to gain strength to overcome that situation. But it is also an important thing that when we are happy, we have to also seek the source of happiness, not escape from the happiness, not escape from sorrow, sorry. When we encounter sorrow, we want to escape from sorrow. When we encounter happiness, we want to stick to happiness for the same reason, in order to escape from sorrow. So, the approach suggested by sages is, do not run away from one and get addicted to the other, opposite one. Stay with happiness to find out the source of happiness. Stay with sorrow to find out the source of sorrow. And we will find that both happiness and sorrow comes from the same source. What is it? Our ego. And you investigate that source further, we'll find out that that source is fictitious. It rises and falls. It's never permanent. Behind it is the one that knows happiness and sorrow, untouched, unattached, undisturbed, and that is the witness. That is why we see many people, if we look into the stories of incidents of enlightenment of great masters, many people have described that they went through intense suffering and pain when finally the enlightenment or the awareness dawned in. For example, Eckhart Tolle describes that he went through intense frustration and depression at a certain point in life. And he was so fed up at one time that he did not want to live. And he said, I hate myself. I don't want to live anymore. In that intense depression, when he said, I hate myself, suddenly awareness dawned on him. And he asked of himself, wait a minute. If I hate myself, am I too I and myself? Who am I hating? And then that was the beginning of a transformative journey for the great master that he is today. So the key is, it is difficult, it is not easy, but we will miss the truth if we run away from experiences. The basic reason is we think experience, the God or self or realization is somewhere else, not in this world. It is in here and now. The experience will continue, but the understanding of the false as false will help us not to be attached to the false. That which is a composite is subject to decay. What do we say is the composite? Anything that is made up of lower level elements coming together of lower level elements. Now, for example, wood is made up of atoms of wood, molecules of wood, and then atoms of wood. Now, The wood itself as matter can be destroyed. Atom is made up of protons and protons and neutrons and electrons. So that also is a composite. So it also is not eventually long lasting, relatively longer lasting, but not permanent. What is indivisible? The most fundamental particle that is makes up, that is independent, is indivisible. So anything that is made up of composites, that means a combination of more than one element, is eventually destroyable. So Adi Shankara is saying here, Panchikritam, that which is made up of Panchikarna, the five elements in subtle forms coming together in different proportions. Panchamahabhuta, the five final elements, making up the five elements, and the five elements coming together, Panchamahabhutam, the five elements in the world, bigger one. Then, for what reason? As a home for Sukha Dukkha experience, the experience of happiness and sorrow. And then it says Satkarma Janyam, as a result of the past karma, because to get a human body, we have whatever, human body or animal body, whatever karmic impressions have resulted in this body. Satkarma Janyam. Then it says that this body goes through 6 stages of existence. The first stage is asti, or existence. Now, before a body is born, the body has come into existence in the womb of the mother by the coming together of two cells. So it comes into existence before it is formed. The first stage is the body has to come into existence. The matter has to come into existence as energy. And then energy consolidates into single cell, multiple cells, and then organs grow. So the first stage is existence, which is termed asti. Then jayate, which is being born. It comes into the earth after spending 9 months in the womb of the mother. Jayate. Then vardhate, it grows. Viparinimate, it matures, it stabilizes. After the youth, it keeps growing. Vardhate, it keeps growing from childhood to youth, and then it stabilizes, it matures. How long will the body grow? How long will the energy keep increasing? Up to a certain age. Then it says viparinimate, and then apakshiyate, it starts declining, it starts deteriorating, and eventually it says vinashyatiti, vinashya iti. So it gets destroyed. It's subject to decay. So existence, the first one, that means it's come into existence before the physical form, in the subtle form. Then it is born. Then it grows. Vardhate, it grows. Then it stabilizes or matures. Viparinimate. Then it starts declining. Apakshiyate. Then it gets destroyed. Vinashyati. So this is a natural law. Now we can apply this to human body. You can apply it to all matter. Any composite matter, that means any matter made up of coming together of different parts or elements, are subjected to these 6 stages. So is the body, human body. So when we know that the human body is subject to these 6 stages by the law of nature, the law of Prakriti, This cannot be negated. Then we must understand and see this as false. By false meaning, has a temporary existence. It cannot have a permanent existence. Now, if we think the body is real, that or it's permanent, by body we mean all aspects of the body. Sthula Sharira, gross body, Sukshma Sharira, the subtle body, and Karana Sharira, the causal body. Now, if we consider these by ignorance, by wrong understanding as reality, by reality we mean it is permanent, then we are engaging only in the world thinking temporary as permanent and living a life of ignorance. The mind has to come to terms with false as a false. It has to recognize dream as a dream. If we are faked, if we are faked to believe that the dream is real, then we'll keep enjoying the dream till the nightmare, that we can no longer enjoy the nightmare. We have to arrive at it through discrimination or Viveka. And in Viveka, when we understand clearly and logically that the body and the body mind complex is subject to continuous change and is not permanent, then we lose interest naturally in impermanent things. And that is Vairagya. Now, giving up, this is what is meant by giving up. When we release our attachment to the impermanent, it is energizing and liberating at the same time. Suppose we are carrying a heavy burden, a heavy suitcase on our shoulders. If you are going on a long trip and we have a suitcase and then a shoulder bag, laptop bag, which is heavy, we have stuck in several other things. Now, when we put the bag on our shoulders down, we feel so relieved, right? Now, that relief is not just it. Psychologically, when we give up something, an attachment of something that we have considered as false, it not only energizes us, but it liberates us from that very attachment. Then it frees our mind, and the mind is free to explore something that is permanent. Otherwise, it is bound by the attachment of the temporary. So that is why, we have to hit at the neti principle first before we can go to the iti principle. We have to negate all that is limiting in our direct experience. If we simply say Brahman is permanent, self is permanent, witness is permanent, it will be a concept in the mind. So, the approach of Advaita Vedanta is first recognize the impermanence of all that we experience in our day-to-day life. Whether it's the body, physical need, or the mental need, or even the relationships. It doesn't mean we will not again. Now the other problem will come. If we detach, can we function in the world? Now you will see from the lives of all realized beings that they have been more effective and they do a lot more things while they live for the world, in the world, than we ordinary human beings. That is because we do things in an ignorant state for ourselves and it doesn't generate enough energy. Whereas realized beings do things, perform actions for the welfare of the larger good, and it generates a lot of energy. In fact, if you want to know what is it to give up, there's a beautiful story of Socrates. It's supposed to be, um, I don't know if it's a real life incident, but it is popularly narrated. Socrates was a great teacher and a master to many people, a realized master. But he was very, very poor. He had a family, and his wife, he was so poor that he could not actually manage 2 square meals a day for his family. So his wife used to continuously daunt him, of what use is your wisdom? It doesn't help us provide 2 square meals a day. And he would simply smile and keep quiet. But the beauty is, Socrates had many, many students who were some of the richest in the world. And so his wife used to say, why don't you ask this student? He'll give you one, if he makes up his mind, if you ask him and he makes up his mind, he will provide you for a lifetime and you don't have to struggle. Story goes that Socrates never stretched out his hand for help, financial help for his difficulty to any of his students. On the contrary, he was giving knowledge and wisdom to everybody. Such was his greatness. But there was one more peculiar thing that Socrates used to engage in. He used to go every day to the market. In those days, the market, and he used to enjoy seeing every material in the market. Every new thing that is in the market, he would simply enjoy seeing it. And then he would touch it, feel it. Then many of his students would think he would buy it because he was so keenly looking at some of the intricate things that are available in the market. And they would even offer, Master, would you like to buy this? I will pay for it. But he said no. He would never buy anything. It is said that he never purchased anything, though every evening he would go to the market faithfully to see. And one day, one of his students, out of curiosity, asked him, Master, you go for shopping every day, you go to the market every day, but you don't buy anything. If you are not buying, why do you go to the marketplace? What Socrates said is stunning. He says, I can see so many things that I don't need. That is the growing up mind. Can you see this? Unattached mind, unattached being. You see things, but you recognize that you don't need instead of grabbing it. That comes out of Viveka. So discrimination must dawn first. Discrimination between the real and the unreal, between the temporary and the permanent. Then dispassion will come, Vairagya. Naturally. Otherwise, dispassion can be forced. If it is forced, it will return as a deeper desire, a more intense desire later. It will bounce back because suppressed energy cannot be contained for long. So we must understand that the purpose of sadhana The purpose of sadhana, like the lamp, is to burn the attachment to the temporary. Just like the candle's wax keeps melting as it burns, and eventually the flame is gone, the whole candle burns away, till the attachment to the body goes, nothing can happen. You will stick to the flame. There is the form, there is the flame, there is the experience. So, what do we do? After the candle burns itself, what happens? The flame extinguishes. Where is the flame that was once burning? It is in the same state as before when the candle was not lit. So the state of the flame before it was lit and the state of the flame after it's extinguished is the same. But you know what the beauty is? That same state is there even when the flame is burning. But because the flame, burning flame, is bright and colorful, we can't recognize that state which gives rise to that flame. Only when the flame was there, only when the flame is there prior to its lighting, it can give rise to a flame, isn't it? Nothing can come out unless it is there embedded in the previous state of manifestation. A tree, a plant cannot sprout from the seed if the plant or the tree is not within the seed. The sun cannot give light if the light is not present within the sun. So, the being, the self, manifests as a flame, as an experience, as I am, as the witness, as the experiencer. And before that, that self must be available. And in the flame, the non flame must be available for the flame to burn. We can't recognize it because the flame is bright, the flame is attractive, colorful. We need some sense of quietude to recognize that which is the source of the flame. For example, can we recognize stars in the brightly lit daylight? No. But when night dawns, there are so many stars twinkling in the sky. And we can see the beauty of the stars twinkling. Similarly, when the mind is so very active and busy in the affairs of the world, how do we expect to recognize the self? There needs to be a quietening of the mind, and a quiet mind is, in the quiet mind, the consciousness, the pure awareness reflects itself faithfully, and we get a taste of bliss. But the Vedantic approach is recognize impermanent as impermanent, use Viveka. You don't have to stop the movie to know that the screen is present before the movie, during the movie, and after the you can logically deduce it through your sharp intellect. So, what happens in the world continues to happen as a natural law of nature. Action keeps happening, you know, and then activity keeps on happening, but those activities are related to the welfare of the larger good. Whereas, from an ignorant person's perspective, all activities happen for the welfare of the individual, for self aggrandizement. So, burning of the wick, burning of the candle is inevitable. We can't see this. We have to allow that. It has to happen. So, flame can be given to, the flame gives light to the surroundings. The other way is to recognize the state of the flame before the flame was lit. So the unmanifest state, the supreme state that gives rise to the flame, that gives rise to the experience. So that is the whole crux of the sadhana. Thank you so much. I appreciate your patient listening.